Welcome everyone to the Teaching Edge podcast, and I'm happy to have with me today Eric Sheninger. Eric is a prominent educational leader, consultant, and author recognized for his innovative approaches to transforming teaching and learning in the digital age. He's the founder and CEO of Aspire Change, a consultancy that supports educational systems worldwide in enhancing outcomes for learners. As a thought leader in education, Eric has authored several books, including Digital Leadership, Learning Transformed, Disrupting Thinking in Our Classrooms, and Personalize. And he's also a sought-after speaker presenting globally on topics related to educational transformation and leadership. Eric, it's wonderful to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Excited to be here and excited to talk education.
Great. That's what we are here for. And I'd like to jump right into this concept of digital leadership. To people who are not aware of what this means, you emphasize the importance of educators embracing technology in meaningful ways. I've listened to some of your talks and heard you speak of how you got into this. So I'd really like to first hear from you, what is the message to school leaders and teachers about this role of digital tools in today's education?
Yeah, I think as we look at just leadership in general, leadership is leadership. The same effective strategies that were leveraged thousands of years ago are still prevalent today. When we look at establishing a shared vision, communication, holding people accountable, building those relationships. And when we look at the digital aspect, as leaders, we have to be cognizant of the fact that the world's changed. And the key question is, how can technology be used to support and enhance what we should already be doing? Let's take communication, for example. You won't find an effective leader who's not an effective communicator. And when we look at the world today, everybody is glued to their phones. They're using social media apps. So leaders today understand that it's important to meet their stakeholders where they're at and engage them in two-way communication. Also, when we think about just being able to curate, practice, and really think about how we tell that story of what's actually working. As a principal going back 10 years ago, my most, influential or valuable tool was Instagram because I loved being able to take pictures and pictures of the pedagogical shifts that my teachers were implementing. And the brain processes images a lot faster than text. It also provides more clarity into our ability to lead our people. So through those pictures, I could share all these amazing practices, but then really begin to unpack what were the leadership shifts that occurred? How did I provide feedback to my staff? So, the whole role of technology is being able to capture that qualitative evidence instantly and then being able to share it to build morale, but also to really be a more transparent leader. And I could go on, but the idea is simple. The world is only becoming more and more digitally connected. And the key aspect that we have to consider as leaders is, are we doing our roles effectively? And how might technology help us do what we're already doing better?
So if we have either a principal or a teacher listening to us and they try to connect the dots, okay, they say, okay, great idea. I'll start using Instagram just as an example. How would that happen in real life? What would be an example of that?
Yeah, I'll give you a great example. So yesterday I was coaching here in the United States, and I saw some really well-designed stations in third grade. And what I was able to do was take a picture. And then I unpacked that image today when I was meeting with coaches from that district. And we really talked about what were those key aspects that went into the pedagogical design. How are teachers using data to group, regroup, target instruction? Look at how two different groups were stationed by adults providing targeted support. Then we saw purposeful use of technology where students were working independently on a digital tool. And then we also saw students up moving around, collaborating in the hallway. Because of that picture, I was able to really showcase the effective elements of this shift, station rotation, and then be able to weave that into the feedback as well as pulling the pieces that could be applied to other classrooms and other schools in that system.
Right. And do you so do you see let's say schools that you work with or educators that you work with, do you see them now using these tools and then sharing this with who? With their principals, with other teachers?
Yeah, I mean, my thing is really getting the principals and the other support staff to kind of grab those pictures to validate what they are doing, but to also embed it in their professional learning. Teachers always tell me, Eric, we know the why. We want to know how can we do it and what can it look like, especially when it comes to technology, because there is a lot of surface level ineffective use when it comes to digital tools. And that's why technology is getting a bad rap. We really want to come back to what are those core practices, tried and true, that we know work. How can we see examples by content, by grade level, unpack them, and then begin to use that as a springboard to either implement the practice or to refine what we're already doing?
Okay. I think this opens up, we could discuss different technologies, and later on, actually, I would like to talk about the specific huge technological advancement that we had lately with AI. We'll get to that, but I think really there is so much technology out there that can be used, and I think it's very perceptive to say, okay. We know the why. Now, how do we connect the dots? How do we implement? How to achieve the how with these great technological tools? I think when we were learning as children, we didn't have all of that. So not using it is just missing huge opportunities, and I definitely agree. Now, you also talk about the idea of personalization. And how does this fit in with the use of technology? And what's the idea behind personalization as compared to the standard?
Yeah, let's talk about how we went through school. Typically the experience was doing the same thing at the same time, the same way. And it was a very impersonal experience. It was a lot of sit and get, chalk and talk. There was no real differentiation. And, it was a one size fits all approach. So we know without a doubt that that's not how we learn as humans. And when we think about learners, the definition that I've come up with personalization is all students getting what they need when and where they need it to learn. It is not about putting all kids on a device, having them use whatever adaptive learning tool and say, this is personalized. That's not.
Yeah, I
That's an
see.
impersonal experience because there's no talking, there's no discourse, there's no relationship building. So as we think about personalization, we got the root word personal. How do we build those relationships? How do we hook kids in? How do we help them see the relevance, the meaning, the purpose in what they're learning? And then really branching out, looking at high agency elements, voice, where every student is able to participate in a review of prior learning, a check for understanding, or closure. You could have all students respond on individual whiteboards, post-it notes, or using technology. The key is all. Choice, choosing the right tool for the right task, choosing how to demonstrate understanding. Maybe a student chooses to draw. Maybe a student chooses to write out. Maybe a student chooses to create an artifact using the technology of their choice. Path. If we put all students on that same path and they follow a linear progression, we know that's not going to meet their needs because of their learning preferences. And when we look at all the different ways that we could set up learner paths, that's where I think technology has the most promise. Pace. If learning is the goal, students should be able to learn at their own pace within reason. Why? Learning is a process. It's not an event. And finally, place. Place can be virtual. Place can be outside. Place can be flexible seating with flexible pedagogy. What I tried to explain is there is not one right or best way to personalize, but the idea is as simple as it is powerful. How do we create experiences where all students get what they need when and where they need it to learn.
Yeah, I think this is so well put. I can share with you. When I was a young boy, I came from abroad to the United States and spent 2 years, and I didn't speak a lot of English back then. And I had this amazing experience in math class. They had us all take. I didn't understand what was happening, but they had us all take a skip test before the subject. Okay, maybe this is something that's done a lot. I don't know if it is. But those who were able to pass this skip test were given other stuff to do, myself included.
Mhm.
So I always found, and I think it's, for example, speaking of pace, this is an example of pace. Take different students who are learning at a different pace and give them different paths and give them different options. And I think today there it was, it's just a test, and then they split the group into whatever, the main group and some other students. But I think the idea was there. And to me personally, I can say that this was a huge change because exactly like you said, I felt that the teacher who could hardly speak with me actually looked at my specific needs and my specific position at that time and made a shift for it. So, and I found that in that school again and again. And I'm just guessing, and you have this huge experience as a principal and working with principals. I'm guessing that this is something that comes from the top, that comes from the principal uh, giving these ideas to the staff, even without technology.
Yeah, I'd say the leader has a pretty significant role in establishing the vision, but creating a culture where people are open to taking those risks and they don't fear failure. But the principal, the leader is only one or a few people. The real, push behind personalization is the teacher in the classroom that embraces different and better, that understands that there is not one right way to learn, and looks to improve and enhance what they're already doing while maximizing his or her time to really support those students that need it, whether they need more enrichment or they need more intensive supports.
So, can you share some examples of, what teachers did after, being introduced to these concepts, and also on the same note, do you see pushback from, I don't know, the organization, the teachers themselves, to these ideas?
Well, I'm going to start with the pushback piece. There's pushback on everything because there is a perception that when you shift to something like personalization, it's more work. It's not more work, it's the right work. And the key thing with personalization is how do we maximize the time that we have with students? There is only one thing and one thing only that teachers can control: how they use their time with kids in class. And we're not saying don't do whole group or don't do direct instruction. We're saying pare that down, really focus on a well-designed mini lesson that gets the key concepts, that exposes the students to the content. Then shift to more student-centric pathways that are equitable to really unleash the potential of our kids. And, as I mentioned before, there's not one right way to personalize. But my team and I focus on four main pedagogical shifts. The first one I mentioned already is station rotation or centers, where data is used to group, regroup, target instruction, and differentiate. And the key is after the mini lesson, the teacher uses data and homogeneously groups the students so that when he or she has them in small group, they are able to target instruction based on what those kids actually need. Then another station could be independent practice. It could be a well-designed worksheet. It could be independent reading. And then the third station, that's where you can start integrating technology and all these adaptive learning tools that allow students to follow a path that's appropriate for them. The second shift is choice activities. A choice activity could be simply choosing one of these three well-designed tasks. It could be a must do, may do. Here's the task or tasks you must do. Then here are the ones you may do. That's where you start bringing in enrichment, relevance. And while the students are working on those tasks, the teacher can use data and start pulling individuals or real small groups for intensive support. Another great choice activity is the choice board. A choice board doesn't have to be 9 options just because the template has 9 options. It could be 3. Choose one of 3. And again, while the students are working, the teacher is using their time to support students that need it. You can also leverage playlists. A playlist is just a list of tasks that students choose the order in which to do those tasks. And you could differentiate by having 2 different versions of the playlist. And again, following the mini lesson, playlist, kids are working at their own pace, following a path that works for them while the teacher supports students. And finally, you could do flipped lessons. Flipped is giving the students the content outside of class in lieu of meaningless homework. I have some strong opinions on homework based on what the research says. But students can watch a 7 to 10 minute video of the concept that's going to be addressed in class. Then, embedded assessments, the students know where they are. That then frees up the teacher with the students to differentiate, to implement cooperative learning, to support students that need it. So, station rotations, choice activities, playlists, flipped lessons. You can also use virtual courses or virtual experiences where students are able to work at their own pace. 5 options. The key is not doing those all the time. Picking and choosing the most appropriate moment to personalize is key. It's not about doing these strategies all the time. It's looking for those opportunities inherent when we're going through the curriculum to allow us to support those students who need it.
Wow. This was a whole course in a few minutes. I think I really think people listening to us could actually pause and rewind and listen to your entire segment now. This is so actionable, really wonderful. So thank you for that. It's so many ideas in just very concentrated amount of time, which is excellent, excellent. Just share a little bit from your background. What excited you to go into this whole education field?
Well, I didn't want to be an educator. I wanted to be
Okay,
I wanted to be a marine biologist. My parents let me
okay.
follow my dream, and then I got my degree in marine biology, was getting a master's, and decided I was actually teaching college freshman labs as a graduate assistant. And that was when I learned my calling was not to be a marine biologist, but to be a teacher. Then I came back, got certified, and ironically enough, my first teaching job was teaching marine biology. And then I wanted to be a leader like my dad, who he was a primary principal for over 30 years. Went back, got my credentials, and was a principal. But my mindset was very fixed. What you hear today is not the person I was. I believed in conformity, compliance, control. And it was about 15 years ago when I chased a student through my building because he broke our cell phone policy. And when I caught him, he thanked me for creating a jail out of what should be a school. That's when I had my aha moment. I began to learn how to unlearn and relearn. And that's when I really, kind of by mistake, or maybe it was fate, really started to follow a path of digital leadership and personalization that helped me become a better principal, but in turn created a culture that empowered teachers and students alike. And we improved achievement, but most importantly, we created a place where people felt that their work was valued. And when people feel their work is valued, when they have autonomy, that's when they're going to take those risks. And if there's accountability for growth, that's when the academic achievement starts to improve.
So how do you make this shift from someone who is very, very strict and believes that students should all follow this regime? how do you make this shift? Or if someone is listening to us who has this approach, school should be a place of order and a place, and maybe it should. But how do you really can you explain this shift in thinking?
I can try. I mean, if we want classrooms and schools to be about order, we have to ask ourselves, does that reflect the world that our students need to be able to live and work in? Because the world is anything but order. There's a lot of chaos. And the job of schools is to prepare students not for something, but to prepare them for anything. And we have to ask that key question. And what I like to do is my role is not to tell people what to do. I don't care how many books someone's written, how many TED Talks. My job is get people to think, not just about what they do, but why do you do things the way you do them? How might you do it better? And what tells you if you're successful? And the key is to question our practice, because comfort is the enemy of progress. Many people don't change because they think that inherently they're doing a great job. Then there's fear. So comfort and fear are the big inhibitors. Until we look ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, are we held back by comfort? Because comfort leads to compliance. Compliance leads to doing the same thing over and over again. That's the way we've always done it. Fear becomes that big mental barrier as to why we can't do things. So as I think about questions, it comes back to, who do we serve? We serve kids. We serve students. So it's incumbent upon us to understand that there's no perfection in education. There's no perfect lesson, no perfect teacher, no perfect administrator, school, district, doesn't exist. What does exist is the opportunity to grow. Chase growth, not perfection. Don't be held back by compliance, because our learners need to be able to survive and thrive in a chaotic world where there is limitless potential if we prepare them how to seize on that potential.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I really liked your point about what are we preparing them for? We are preparing them for something that has little order or a lot of disorder, we could say. And if we ask ourselves, what are we preparing them for? Then I think this brings up a lot of these answers naturally.
Yep.
So yeah, excellent, excellent. Let's talk about another aspect that you highlight, which is the need for disruption and innovation in education. And specifically, like I said, before we spoke about technology, and today we have a lot of disruption that we see, and a lot of innovation as well with all that's happening with AI. We see a lot of resistance from educators. We see resistance from schools. We see some really taking this in and really embedding it. Where do you stand on what's happening in today's new technology?
Well, I mean, I look at our world as it's all about disruptive forces. Think about how disruptive the smartphone was, or the computer, or paper. Disruption's not new, but disruption also makes us uncomfortable. And then we have a decision to make. How will I adapt? How will I evolve? And, I like to look at it through the lens of our learners. In disruptive times, how are we preparing students to replace conventional ideas with innovative solutions to authentic problems? Notice my definition does not call out technology. Technology, we have to stop calling it out because it's just the part of the world that we live in. But, disruptive thinking flies in the face of a one-size-fits-all approach. That's the way we've always done it. Students complying all the time as opposed to authentic engagement. So when we talk about disruption, and AI is probably one of the most disruptive technology forces, although Elon Musk just rolled out his robots that people can buy to help with chores around the house. Well, technology has always been a disruptive force. So, we have to really look at what are those key competencies that we are preparing our students to have when they leave grade levels, schools, or the system. And it really comes down to two things. How do we get our kids to think, not new? And how do we get our learners to apply thinking in relevant and meaningful ways? Also, not new. But what's new is, are we doing that consistently? Do we prioritize? Scaffolding our questions and tasks, giving students challenging problems to solve, having them see the relevant connection to, I'm learning this concept in 10th grade English. Here's how it's going to help me down the line, no matter what I decide I'm going to do. So it's really looking through the lens of curriculum, instruction, assessment, and really thinking about what are those intangible outcomes we want our learners to be able to develop that are going to help them be successful, not just now, but well into the future.
So when you come and implement this, and again, we could talk about AI or generally technology. Are there ways that you approve of or disapprove of in terms of how technology is used? Because it is true that today's students can use a lot of the new tools to write for them, to almost think for them. So how do you see this in practice?
Yeah, I try to tread lightly with not oversharing my opinions or beliefs,
Okay.
because that's understanding that everyone is different, has different needs. However, I firmly believe that questions are more important than answers. And I think if we get our students to be able to question the why, the how, and the what behind their learning, we've done our job. And when we look at technology, or we look at any type of pedagogical approach, it's what are those questions we're using to frame that experience? And if we're asking right questions, if they're open-ended, if they lead to relevant connections, if students are able to collaborate, communicate with their peers, and technology becomes a ubiquitous, seamless aspect of that learning experience, we've met our goal. Why can students not, in some cases, manage their devices or their time? Because we're not teaching them how to really leverage and focus on using technology to meet a goal, but also the intangibles that are more important. The face-to-face communication, the body language, being able to work with the team, being able to self-regulate, being able to construct knowledge, to create new knowledge, to apply it in an authentic way. So I think we really have to take a hard look at, and the research is pretty clear. The good, effective strategies have not really changed. So how are we using tech again as a segue to support and enhance? And how are we picking those moments where, technology, without a doubt, can improve what we do? For example, we can design a lesson around standards. We can have all these effective strategies. We can have a hook in the beginning. We can review prior learning. We can have inputs. We can model, checks for understanding, guided independent practice. But then at the end, maybe we use technology for a self-graded exit ticket so that teacher gets immediate feedback to the degree to which the students understood that standard, and making connections in that exit ticket to how kids feel they can use the concepts in their world. So what I try to do is just take a tried and true strategy, closure, link it back to the point of the lesson, but use technology in a purposeful way. Maybe that's the only time it's used during the lesson, to ease the burden of the teacher, to maximize time, to get immediate feedback, but also validation for the learners that their time in that class was not used in vain.
Yeah, I think what I take or one thing that I take from what you're saying is that we can look at the technology or the existing of these powerful technologies as a new challenge to the teacher. So it makes the teacher think, how can I phrase the questions differently? How
Yep.
can I create the structure differently? How can I create it in a way that that there is that the student has to think, has to come up with their own ways, and not have the technology do it for them, while at the same time integrating the technology into the process. So
And you mentioned some good the points you're mentioning is that's how a teacher can save time, where a teacher can identify the standard and the strategy and then leverage artificial intelligence to come up with scaffolded questions aligned to authentic scenarios. The role of AI is to save teachers and administrators time. AI will not build relationships. It will not teach the lesson. It will not facilitate learning. We need people to do that. But AI can help us close those gaps in our practice. It can help us work smarter, not harder. It can give us ideas, questions to, again, focus on the most important thing, the relational learning in our classrooms.
yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Let me ask you a question. What is the most uncommon piece of advice that you have given about teaching that more people should know about?
Huh. Uncommon. Oh boy, that's I give a lot of advice, but what I try to convey is it's the small shifts to practice done consistently that are going to lead to the biggest results. Small shifts to practice done consistently. It's not about innovation. It's not about new. It's not about more. It's about those small shifts that are consistently implemented.
That's it's it could be easily missed, I think, because when when people hear that this huge amount of ideas that you share, and things that experiences that you've gone through, and you talk about digital leadership and personalization and use of technology, then it might, if I'm a teacher, it might lead me to think, okay, what are all these new things that I can do? But at the same time, you are saying, no, don't focus on that at all. Focus on
Nope.
the little amount that you pick from this, and then do it
Exactly.
consistently again and again and again. And
Yep.
it's easy to get confused when you have all these wonderful ideas and you think it's about the ideas, while what you are saying is it's about the consistency of implementing your own selection of the ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Are there resources, books that you love? If you had to recommend, let's say, three great resources for from your own books, from others, what would come to mind?
Well, I'd say besides the 8 books that I've written,
Yes.
besides those, which, anyone can Google my name and find out what those are, I'd say Drive by Dan Pink, Science and Motivation really changed my whole trajectory as an educator. So that's number one. Number two, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell really
Mhm.
talks about, how we can move forward by putting in the right effort and the right work. And I think number three would be the no complaining rule by John Gordon. And this rule is pretty simple. Number one, don't complain. Number two, if you do complain, have two solutions for your complaint. Those 3 books totally changed my trajectory as an educator. But, between disruptive thinking, personalized digital leadership, which are my latest books, what I try to do is weave in some of those lessons learned outside education, but then really put it into a practical lens for teachers and leaders to implement with fidelity.
Excellent. Great suggestions. All right, let's end with a quick fire round of questions. Okay.
All right.
Teacher's role becoming more important or marginal?
So much more important because they are the buffer. They are the intermediary between all this chaos.
Technology in education made things better for students or worse?
Better if implemented with purpose and effectively.
Excellent. I think to your point from before, if you just start implementing everything, then nothing is achieved at the end.
Yep.
Great. Education should be uniform and centralized or personalized and flexible.
Oh, that's easy.
Well,
Personalized and flexible, because that's what we expect as adults.
the goal of education is to prepare workers or inspire individuals.
Inspire individuals who can pursue a path of purpose in the work of their choice.
Great. AI, what is it going to do? Destroy education or improve it?
It depends on the route we take. If we understand the role of AI and how it can support and enhance teaching, learning, and leadership, it will be an asset. But if we ignore it and let it perpetuate outside of the classroom, then it could have negative consequences.
Okay. A topic we haven't touched upon, parents' involvement in education. Should it be minimal or substantial?
Somewhere in between. Parents have to understand that they need to trust the system. They have to really, build those connections with teachers, but understand that the teacher is with them a lot of time during the day. And we have to go back to trusting the adults who are working tirelessly to help our students be successful.
Wonderful. Standardized testing. Is it essential or harmful?
It serves a purpose to a small extent.
Okay. Curriculum. Should it emphasize academic subjects or life skills?
Life skills, because if we can't connect the academics to the life skills that students need, what's the point of having a curriculum in the first place?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think one kind of life skill, well, you mentioned, for example, time management.
Yep.
That's hardly taught, I think. Financial literacy, hardly taught. Many of these things are hardly taught. Homework, well, you said you had strong opinions, so necessary or unnecessary?
Research before grade 8 shows homework has little to no academic benefit.
Wow.
Homework can be effective if it's about reflection and it's a reasonable amount of time. Students should not be doing hours of homework after they spent hours in school, because it begs the question, what are we actually doing with the time that we have with our students?
Wow, I think that goes against many standard approaches for many teachers. Give them lots of homework so that they do lots of learning. Completely the opposite. Yeah. Discipline, should it be strict or lenient?
Well, I think strict in using a relational approach. Routines are important. Respect is important. So I think it's how we define strict. I think strict that emphasizes the relationship.
Okay, super. Last one, grading. Should it be based on performance or effort?
That's easy. Performance.
Okay.
Effort, and again, a student can put a lot of effort into homework, but if they're all wrong and we're grading it, which is an inequitable practice anyway, what have we accomplished?
Okay, great. Look, this is very, very inspiring. I'd like to end first with asking you where we can find more, where we can find your work, your books, workshops.
Yeah, it's easy to find me. You can go to my website, ericsheninger.com, or just Google Eric Sheninger, Sheninger, and you'll have way too much information on me.
Okay, way too much information. That's wonderful. It's really been wonderful. I think really you've given us so much. Is there a question I should have asked that I didn't?
Actually, no, you really covered the spectrum in terms of, you know, where we are, where we need to be heading. And, I think the one thing is we have to understand that everyone is human and you got to show yourself some grace. And it's okay to say, I don't know and I need help. That's a sign of strength, not weakness. Leverage the people in your immediate networks, reach out beyond, and just always question your practice as a means to grow into the teacher or administrator that students need and deserve.
Excellent, excellent. Eric, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Really, thank you for your time. Very, very happy to have this chat with you. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.